We've been doing a survey of the Old Testament, looking at each individual book briefly, looking at the introduction and then a brief discussion of its overall contents. We just finished Psalms. We are now in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs, the title of the book is taken from the Hebrew Bible, Mishle Shalomah, that is, the Proverbs of Solomon. The word proverb refers to a brief saying or a terse maxim which expresses wisdom. This includes discourses, sentences, and brief expressions throughout the book. As to its authorship, Solomonic authorship is established for the greater section of the book, according to the sentence, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king in Israel. We see this in 1:1, 10:1, and 25:1. From this reference, it is felt by conservative Bible scholars that Solomon is responsible for the first 29 chapters of the book. The fact that Solomon is reported as having written 3,000 Proverbs, 1 Kings 4:32, and also that he is viewed as a man famous for his God-given wisdom. We see this in 1 Kings 10:1, and further add further support to Solomonic authorship. The men of Hezekiah, responsible for editing and publishing chapters 25 to 29, were no doubt scribes of King Hezekiah, who compiled this section around 700 BC. Agur and King Lemuel are responsible for chapters 30 to 31, and they are unknown as far as their identity is concerned. As to the date of the Proverbs, they were written during the time of Solomon from a conservative viewpoint, around 971 to 931 BC. The remainder were collected together during the reign of Hezekiah, around 715 to 686 BC. Chapters 30 and 31 were probably then edited at this time, and the entire book was no doubt completed by around 700 BC. In terms of its historical background, the basic setting and background for the book is the glorious reign of Solomon. He prayed for an understanding heart, that is, to discern between good and evil. We see this in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 9 and 12. His request then was granted in 1 Kings 4:29, and his wisdom was displayed then in practical and political matters. His name then reached far and wide, and many came to express their admiration of him and to seek his counsel and wisdom. We see this in 2 Chronicles 9. It was out of this background that as many as 3,000 Proverbs were attributed to him. The historical background for the compilation then of chapters 25 to 29 was the reign and reform of Hezekiah, in which an interest in the wisdom and Proverbs of Solomon were revived. That's in 2 Chronicles 29:30. As to the purpose of the book of Proverbs is to give practical wisdom to its readers in order to better enable them to lead a proper life. Numerous subjects are then treated, such as wisdom, adultery, boasting, counseling, drunkenness, proper friendships, laziness, materialism, parent-child relationships, proper speech, wealth, women, worship, and many others. It can well be observed that while Psalms are necessary for the devotional life, Proverbs is essential for the practical life. So the two can be blended together in that way. As to the overall content and flow of thought of the Proverbs, the theme of the book of Proverbs is practical wisdom. The book of Proverbs then divides itself into 5 basic sections. There are the Proverbs of Solomon concerning wisdom in chapter 1 through chapter 9. This is followed by Miscellaneous Sayings of Solomon, chapter 10. Then we have the Proverbs of Solomon collected by Hezekiah in chapter 25 through 29. Then the words of Agur and the words of King Lemuel. Agur in chapter 30, King Lemuel in 31. The first section then begins with the writer's name, his purpose, and the well-known statement which would serve as the theme of the entire book. That is, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It is interesting that the first section then, from 1:7 to 9:18, is basically an anthology of wise sayings in which the author discusses this subject of wisdom. The prophet of wisdom is talked about, its promises, its promise, its payment, its primacy, warnings, allurement in chapters 5 and 8, and its contrast with folly are all discussed. So we see the contrast between wisdom and folly. And this is important to understand the two. And that's why life needs to take into consideration both what is wisdom and then what is folly. In the second section, 10:1 to 22:16, the book deals with for the most part, with miscellaneous sayings that have to do with life and various relations. Various contrasts in conduct are then presented with an admonition concerning wisdom. This is followed then with a section on important sayings in 22 through 24. Such things as friendship, debt, landmarks, diligency, being a guest, speaking, parental discipline, proper speech, drunkards, harlots, wine, envy, wisdom, proper attitudes, laziness, etc., are all considered in that section. Following this is the third section, which contains the Proverbs of Solomon, collected by King Hezekiah, 25 to 29. Admonition then is given concerning proper conduct, with a discussion of various sins that should not accompany one's conduct. In the words of Agur then, in chapter 30, they are spoken warning against slander, disobedience to parents, the adulteress, against strife. And then the book closes with the words of King Lemuel in 31, the evil of drunkenness is then discussed, along with a magnificent poem which sets forth the virtuous woman and wife who deserves the praises of her children and husband. I call Janet my Eshet Chayil, A plus 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 and multiple pluses. That is what chapter 31 is about, the wife of valor. It's a beautiful chapter, and it is one of my very favorites, and I love to share that again with my wonderful wife, Janet. It's interesting, as we look at the outline then, the Proverbs of Solomon concern wisdom in chapter 1 through chapter 9. He, again, as we said, gives the profit of wisdom, its promise in chapter 2, the payment that it gives in chapter 3, its primacy, as we said in 4, the warnings of wisdom, especially against unchastity. The harlot is described in 5, the peril of illicit love, and the exhortation to marital faithfulness in chapter 5. There is the warning against debt in chapter 6, against indolence as well, against deceitfulness, against adultery, and again, we have the allurement of wisdom, its call, its reward, and its eternal character. What a difference between the allurement of the harlot in chapter 5 and 7 and the allurement of wisdom put in contrast with each other. So there is the invitation to enjoy wisdom's banquet over against that of folly. In the second section, as we've seen, it's the Proverbs of Solomon's miscellaneous sayings in 10:1 to 24. We see contrasts in life and conduct, contrast in various situations, contrast in relation to advantage and disadvantage, contrast between the wise and the foolish, and what the conduct of the wise should look like. This is in chapters 10 through 16. There is that admonition concerning wisdom in 22. And the second section of the, we could say, section 2 of the Proverbs of Solomon, we have various sayings. We have sayings concerning the robbery of the poor, concerning friendship, concerning debt, concerning landmarks, concerning diligency, being diligent, concerning what it means to be a guest, concerning how to speak properly, concerning relation to orphans and parental discipline and proper speech, as well as reverence for the Lord, concerning separation from drunkenness, obedience to parents, rejection of harlots, concerning proper use of wine, not overindulgence, for sure. Again, a warning against drunkenness, concerning wisdom, evil and folly, concerning help for the faltering, concerning general wisdom, the victory that the righteous can receive, and also one's reaction to the fall of an enemy. It also concerns worry because of wicked men, one's relation to the Lord and the King, concerning showing partiality, as well as one's actions to one's neighbor, and a warning against laziness. All of that is talked about in that section from 22 to 24. Then, as we saw, we have the Proverbs of Solomon collected by Hezekiah, and this concerns proper conduct when going in the presence of a king, in his court, proper speech, in the home, proper conduct, and self-restraint. Again, further admonitions against various sins in 26, such as the fool, the sluggard, the meddler, the contentious one, the talebearer, the one who brings slander, warning against that, warning against hatred, warning against lying, and advice then concerning different phases of how to conduct oneself. Then we have, as we conclude, sections 4 and 5, the words of Agor, against slander again, against disobedience to parents, which occurs throughout the Proverbs, against the adulteress, and then against strife. And finally, the words of Lemuel, concerning drunkenness again, concerning the virtuous woman. And what a beautiful summary of her character. She is priceless, trustworthy, industrious, unselfish, a helper to her husband, strong and wise. Her reward is that her husband and children praise her at the public gates. And like I said, that's what I want to do constantly with my wonderful wife, Janet, who is truly my Eshet Chayil, A++. But I wanted to go through Proverbs. Thank you for listening. I hope this has been of some help.